Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Fellows Public Presentations. I'm Claudia Rizzini, the Executive Director of the Fellowship Program at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. It is my pleasure to introduce Anat Perry, our Helen Putnam Fellow. We have all experienced contagious laughter among friends or felt concern when a family member begins to cry in front of us. Is there anything more human than how we relate to one another? For the last 2 decades, Anat, an experimental psychologist and social neuroscientist, has made empathy her life's work. From early research demonstrating empathetic brain activity to studies on how proximity affects our perception of others, she has sought empirical answers to what is happening when we understand, feel with, and care for one another. A quarter of the way through the 21st century, advances in technology have fundamentally changed how we interface with the world around us. Virtual assistants like Siri and Alexa have been household names for a decade. Bots like ChatGPT fill an expanding role in our personal and work lives. Many of us now seek answers, assistance, and increasingly advice from artificial intelligence on a daily basis. It is a natural transition, then, that Anat's research has shifted in recent years towards studying empathy in AI-human interaction. While at Radcliffe, Anat is co-editing an interdisciplinary book on empathy and AI. She's also analyzing new and previous research on human perception of empathy when interacting with other people versus with chatbots. Where does AI fail or succeed in expressing concern? Do we appreciate thoughtful text more or less if we think it has been written by a bot? These new questions of value sit at the heart of her project and truly ask us to consider what it is we hold dear in our communication with our friends and loved ones. The Q&A portion of the public talk today will be moderated by Naomi Coe, our Mary Beth and Chris Gordon Fellow, and Section Chief of Breast Medical Oncology at New York University. And now please give a warm welcome to Anat Perry.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I want to start by thanking wholeheartedly the Radcliffe Institute, the staff, the fellows, for this really extraordinary year. I'm going to start with an example. And this example is something that I saw 3 years ago on then Twitter about a company called Coco. Is anyone familiar with Coco? Only a bit. Good. Then you'll hear a news story. Coco is a company that does peer-to-peer support. We all know that we live within a loneliness epidemic. In the US, this is very prevalent for the last 20 years, but we now see it around the world, and definitely after COVID. A lot of people feel very lonely, don't have friends that they can reach to. And what Coco did a few years back is gave people the option to go on any support system they want, on WhatsApp, on Discord, on Telegram, whatever they're familiar with, and ask for support, say whatever it is they're going through. And you can also give support to other people. So they had millions of users who use this app to either give support or ask for support from other humans. And 3 years ago, in January 2023, so that's 2 years ago, when ChatGPT just came out, what they wanted to do is see if ChatGPT can maybe help the supporters, not give support instead of the support or the human supporters themselves, but see if it could be beneficial for them in writing their responses. So it looked something like this. Let's say you get a email or a chat on WhatsApp saying, I'm trying to become a better me and having a hard time. It's easier not to. A very human text, right? And now you're supposed to answer that. You are the human supporter on the other side, and you have to think what you want to reply. They gave the supporters an option to press this, what they called CocoBot here, which actually sent the text to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT could offer a response. And the supporter could decide whether to choose this response, to edit it in some way, or to ignore it and write their own thing. And this is a possible response that ChatGPT gave at the time. I hear you. You're trying to become a better person, and it's not easy. It's hard to make changes in our lives, especially when we're trying to do it alone. But you're not alone. There are people here who care about you and want to help you. I'm proud of you for making the decision to try to improve your life. It takes a lot of courage and strength. I send you love and support as you go through this journey. This is a very empathic response. And indeed, around 4,000 supporters used this for a few days, used this option in more than 30,000 messages. And Coco then asked the people who got these responses, what did they feel? And they said that these were rated as significantly higher. They felt lots of empathy and support and positive emotions after this interaction. And response times went down 50%, right? Because people could respond really quickly. And yet, Coco pulled this from their platform very quickly. And the question is why? And here you can see the original tweet. It's fine if it's too small to read. It's exactly what I've told you about until now. And you can also find it on now X, the original tweet, and millions of viewers and comments since. And this is the same tweet and where we are at now. We pulled this out from our platform pretty quickly. Once people learned messages were co-created by a machine, it didn't work. Simulated empathy feels weird, empty. Machines don't have lived human experience, so when they say, that sounds hard, or I understand, it sounds inauthentic. And I coined that at the time, the artificial empathy paradox, because we have now these artificial machines who can be super empathizers. They write perfect responses. But once we realize that they're actually from a machine, their empathy doesn't work anymore. And you can see similar comments in the thread from that tweet over there. Why can't you tech people be normal? Lots of ethical considerations to take into account, and so on and so forth. But this whole interaction really made me wonder. First, could AI be empathic, and what does that even mean? And a second really important question for for empathy researchers, what do we actually value in human empathy? And like Claudia told you in the introduction, I've been studying empathy for the last 2 decades. But myself and most empathy researchers have focused mostly on the empathizer, on what makes us understand people better, share their emotions and feel with them, how we have biases, we empathize more with our in-group versus our out-group. When we're tired, when we're sleep-deprived, we empathize less, we pay less attention. When we're stressed, we empathize less. We can see different questions about information channels. Do we need to see the other person or just hear them to empathize better? But I guess when we thought about the person receiving empathy, we just thought it was good for them. We know empathy is very beneficial to both sides of the relationship. And we didn't stop to think, what is it that we actually want when we want empathy? What is it that we value? And of course, these questions have a lot of technological implications. What kind of technologies do we want to build? It has lots of ethical important questions. What policy and regulation do we want to have over these technologies? And it has very basic philosophical and psychological questions about what it is that we value in empathy and in human relations. And I've written a lot about its sense, but I want to start with understanding what we actually mean when we mean empathy. How do we define it? And the broadest definition that I could think of encompasses 3 main aspects in the definition of empathy. One is this cognitive aspect. So when we talk about empathy, we talk about understanding the emotional states that the other person is experiencing. The other is an affective aspect. We share some of their emotions. We share their pain. We share their joy. You can also talk about positive empathy. And the third and sometimes neglected aspect is motivational empathy, sometimes also referred to as empathic care or compassion. And it is this feeling that we want to somehow help the other person and alleviate their pain, have them feel less stressful or less sad or less in pain. We know a lot about these things from the empathizer's perspective. And one of the things that we know is that empathy is hard work. We want to think about it as this automatic process, and sometimes it comes to us naturally when we see our kid coming home crying from school. But many times we also cross the street in order to avoid empathizing with a homeless person. Or we turn off the radio, or we close the newspapers because sometimes it's too hard to empathize and we don't want to know. And we know that people who work in jobs that require a lot of empathy suffer from empathy or compassion fatigue. So empathy is effortful and has a motivational component to it. Now let's switch gears and think about all of these components from the recipient's perspective, what I felt we haven't done a lot. And now think about what it means to receive these kinds of empathy, and could you do that with AI? So the first cognitive one is interesting because a lot of people argue whether AI or these large language models today can actually understand you. And I don't think they can understand you in any deep sense of knowing what it's like to be human. But it could give you quite good responses about validating your emotions or appraising what you feel and maybe arguing with you and maybe saying, you know, Naomi, you think you woke up angry this morning, but actually, and especially when you have these AIs that will be connected to your watch and to your calendar and you've been talking with for the whole week, say, Naomi, you think you might be angry, but actually, look, you haven't slept well for the last week, and you have this talk coming up next week, and you have all these deadlines. Maybe you're just stressed. Maybe you're just tired. So it might know a lot about you, even more than your friends or partners, and can give you lots of information, appraising your emotions, validating them, or even arguing with you about what it is that you might be feeling, and helping you understand what it is that you're going through. I think it could do that quite well, and we already have some data showing that in cognitive empathy, in the sense of appraising your emotions, AI does pretty good. But when we think about the two other aspects, if you think about sharing your pain or sharing your joy, it can, of course, just mimic that. It doesn't feel anything, right? And people sometimes fake empathy, too. But with humans, you always have the potential that someone is actually showing you genuine care. They actually are feeling something of what you're feeling. And the last component, which I think was neglected for a while, is this motivational caring component. And like I said, empathy is hard work, and sometimes we get it wrong. We're too tired, we're too involved in what we are going through. The other person is too different from us. But when we suddenly get it right, when someone actually sits with you and takes the time and mental effort and emotional effort, and you feel like they genuinely understood you, this has true value for human beings. This understanding that someone that took the time, took the effort to be with you now is something that is important for our care, for the feeling of care right now, but also for prediction in the future about social relationships and what they mean in our world. This is someone I can trust. This is someone I may be able to cooperate with later on. This is someone who considers me closer to them than I imagined. And when you think about AI here, of course, computers don't really care. And these models can say, I care about you, you're not alone, there is someone here for you. But it doesn't mean anything about any future relationship. It doesn't tell you anything about the social world. And you don't feel any special closeness to anyone in the world. In other words, I argue that what seems to be a limitation of human empathizers, the fact that we are biological beings with finite energy resources for care and support, is why our empathy will be or should be valued more than that from AI. But I'm an experimental psychologist. Until now, all I told you is my theories. I wanted to also see some data. And the data I'm going to show you now is all data gathered by my amazing PhD student, Matan Rubin, who did all the work that you're going to see from now on. And in the first line of studies, what Matan and I wanted to do is something very similar to what Coco did, and we just saw in this tweet. We didn't have availability. This data is not available anywhere. So we gave 1,000 participants a task to write about something real, emotional, that they're going through right now. And then we told half of them that they're going to get a response from ChatGPT that just came out. And the other half, we told that they're going to get a response from another human participant. Now, in reality, all the responses were written by ChatGPT. And this was really important for us because we wanted to see what happens when all else is equal, when you have controlled responses. So any differences you see here is not because humans answer better or worse. Let's assume that AI would be so good that you won't be able to tell the difference. The results being equal, well, how do people perceive these empathic responses from ChatGPT versus from another human? And then we asked people to rate how much empathy they felt, how much positive and negative emotions, how much did they feel help and support, and how much did they want to continue talking to whoever it is they were talking with. And we also asked a question, which we didn't think was so important then, but now I think is one of the most important questions. If they were in the human condition, how much did they believe this person probably used ChatGPT in the response, right? Because we know that's something that we're already starting to do, and many of us do on a daily basis. And we wanted to see, does that matter? And let's see some results. And for those of you who are not familiar with following these graphs, I will tell you the gist of the details in there. It's very easy to follow them. One is we have here on the x-axis, did you think you were getting a response from AI or from a human, and how much empathy you felt? And we see that both responses were highly empathic. And of course, this was a very short one-time interaction. You said something you were going through, you got a perfect empathic response, which we prompt ChatGPT to give an amazing empathic response with all the 3 components of empathy there. So it worked. You felt empathy in whatever response you got. But you felt much more empathy from when you thought you were receiving these responses from a human. And you see this by this X here, the average being higher than this, and this highly significant result. We also see the same thing for positive emotions. People felt more positive emotions after they thought they were interacting with a human versus AI, and they felt less negative emotions. They felt no negative emotions when they thought they were interacting with another human, but when you interact with ChatGPT and it says things like, I care for you, you're not alone, I feel your pain, people sometimes have these, rightly so, negative emotions, and we saw that here. We saw similar responses for support. So people felt more support, wanted to keep the conversation going, wanted to maybe ask more questions for this person later on when they thought they were talking to a human. And what I promised you, this nice result here, interesting result, is the more they thought this person probably used AI to assist them in their response, the less supportive this response was. The less empathy they felt, the less support, the less help. And I want to stop and think about this because I think this is something that a lot of us are doing already on a daily basis. And I want to claim sometimes it's really important. It's one thing to say, well, English is not my native language, and I want to make sure that my email is grammatically correct. And another thing to say to ChatGPT, please write an empathic response to Claudia. Because if the other side feels that this was maybe aided by ChatGPT, something of this feeling of empathy and support goes away. Okay, as some of you know, as scientists in the crowd, when you send a paper out for publications, you get reviews with suggestions and alternative explanations. And here are some that we got and how we answered them. One could be, well, maybe this is something specific to ChatGPT. No, I don't think it's in any way specific to ChatGPT, and it doesn't matter to me if this was ChatGPT 3 or if it will be ChatGPT 13. Let's say it's amazing. The only thing I wanted to check is, are there differences between how we perceive the responses that we get? But just in case, we replicated this with other models, and specifically with Llama, which is an open source model, so anyone can do the same thing and get the same results. The other question was, well, one interaction is not very ecological, and that's a good point. We want in psychology research to make sure that what we do mimics, at least as much as we can, the real world. And even if you call a stranger on a support group or these Coco apps, you usually don't just write something, get a response, and hang up. And so we did the same thing. We replicated this with a few iterations, and we saw that we still get similar results. And then lastly, this is one review that I really liked. One of the reviewers asked, well, maybe this is a halo effect. And by halo effect in psychology, what we mean is that maybe you just read this super empathic response from this human, which was so eloquent and written so nicely in 1 minute that you were just so amazed that you just rated everything as really good. It's super positive, super supportive. I can't believe a human wrote this thing. So what we did, we ran 2 other experiments, exactly the same as the previous ones, but one in which people waited for 3 minutes, which made more sense to write an organized, empathic response, and we still got the same response. In some ways, I think that for humans, it even makes us appreciate the effort more because someone actually took the time to think, to feel, to write, while when ChatGPT waits for 3 minutes, sometimes we just think the computer is stuck. And lastly, we said, well, we prompt ChatGPT to give very short responses, still empathic, but very simple, as if they were empathic responses from a high school graduate. And we still got the same responses. So it's not just these super long and written and nicely written responses that ChatGPT usually writes. Even with short responses, if you think they're from a human, you value them more. But now I want to get back to my first hypothesis. I told you empathy has 3 different aspects, and we wanted to see if people care about them. Is it just maybe technology aversion? People are afraid of this new ChatGPT and they don't want to get anything from it? Or is it they really understand that computers care about them less or not at all and cannot really feel with them? They can just mimic it. So what we did here is, again, the same design, but now we prompt ChatGPT to give some people just cognitive responses, appraising your emotions, telling you it seems that you feel sad or angry. Another group, we gave mainly affective responses, so I feel your pain, I feel your sadness. And the third group, we gave responses that were more focused on motivational empathy, caring, I care for you, you're not alone in the world. And here are the results. Oh, this is just to show that this works. It can give responses that are more cognitive, more effective, or more motivational, and you don't have to read them here. You can believe me that this works. And here are the results. So for cognitive empathy alone, you see a slight difference, but you see this is not significant. So people understand that these large language models can in some way appraise your emotions, and they're fine with it. But when they get affective responses, someone sharing their experience, or someone showing them care, they value them much more when they come from humans. This is what people care about. And so I hope I convinced you that we value empathy from humans more than we value it from ChatGPT. But one question that you could ask is how much more? And one way that we can study this in research is ask people to pay for getting a human response, right? Which we know people sometimes do pay for care and empathy. Another way, which is what we opt for, is having people wait, pay in their time. So what we did here is we had participants, again, asked to write something emotional that they're going through. And after they wrote something, we gave them an option. You can receive an immediate response from AI, from ChatGPT right now, or you can receive a response from a human in 2 hours. Another group was asked if they were willing to wait 24 hours. And another, a week, 2 months, or 2 years to get a human response. And Matan here is still answering some of these people. And then we asked them to give the reasons why. And before I show you the results, I want to say we ran another study, which is very similar to study 4, but a really nice study just came out when we were working on this by Idan, now in Penn State. And what Idan did is she gave participants an opportunity to write something that they're going through, and then she wanted to see if they could feel heard by ChatGPT. She didn't call this empathy, but I think it's a very related construct. And so she gave participants responses from LLMs and responses from actual humans in a 2x2 design, so people got responses from LLMs but thought they were either from LLMs or from humans, got responses from humans but thought they were either from LLMs or from humans, and she could see all of the effects there. And what she showed nicely is these 2 effects that I told you about from the beginning. One, these LLMs are excellent. They write really good responses that make you feel heard. But once you know that they're not from a person, you feel less heard. And so I told Matan, well, we don't even know if our empathic responses actually matter. Maybe what people want is to feel heard, no matter the response. Or maybe, more likely, there are 2 effects. One is you want a person to know what you're going through, even regardless of the response. And then above that, some people also want the empathic response. So we ran a similar experiment to study 4, but here people could just get an immediate empathic response from AI, or wait for 2 hours, 24 hours, and so forth, in order to get an email from a psychologist in training that says, I've read what you wrote. And you know that if you choose AI, no one is going to read it. Not a research assistant, we delete it, no one will know what you wrote. But if you choose a human, it won't be able to answer anything. You'll just get a sentence saying, I read it. And when we got, I thought I would get this nice graph where people are willing to wait, I don't know how much, 2 hours, 1 week, 2 weeks, and then it goes down and people don't want to wait at all. But what we actually got is that around 45% of the people are willing to wait even 2 years just to have a person to talk to them, to give them an empathic response. And around 25% of the people were willing to wait just to get this email saying, I read what you wrote. They want someone, a real person in the world, to know what they're going through. And what's interesting is to look at the reasons. People actually know why they choose each. So why do people choose AI? People choose AI out of curiosity, especially then when ChatGPT just came out. Out of hesitation from a human response, which is something I think we as psychologists, but also parents, people in this world should think about. Sometimes people will go to ChatGPT because they're hesitant about talking to other humans. And because of time, they wanted a response right now, and they had to wait for a human one. Why choose humans? Well, mostly for curiosity, for a human response, or hesitation from AI, not for timing, because you had to wait, but mostly because we thought another person would be able to actually understand us, share our emotions, care for us, and alleviate our loneliness. To conclude, I think that while AI will be able to replace many aspects of our daily lives and our daily interactions soon, when what we need is empathy, especially emotional sharing and genuine care, human connection will be valued more, or should be valued more. Some of it is also up to us. And there are lots of open questions left, a lot of them that we're studying in the lab right now. So for example, why does empathy have this value? I gave you some suggestions, but it's important to look into this more. Is it because of these physical dimensions that we are embodied? We can simulate what the other person is feeling because we have bodies in this world. We are mortal. We experience similar sensations that the AI cannot feel. Is it because humans are biological entities with these limited resources and we want to understand that this care is invested in us and not in a million people at the same time because this has value for our social lives and social interactions later on? Is it because of reciprocity? We want someone that empathizes with us, but that we empathize with tomorrow. It's a dyadic process. We grow through it together. And maybe we call all of this empathy, but we value different things in different interactions with different people in different contexts. And maybe what we want from our empathic spouse is not the same thing that we want from our empathic parents or colleagues or doctor. Another interesting question is, what else has this value? And I like to say in some of my talks, take the next week or take the holiday season and try to see in many interactions that you have around you, both the simple one and the more complex one, which ones would you replace or which one wouldn't you replace with AI? And why? And then see what is it, what other things in our lives has this value that's special in a human relationship. So some things are very similar to empathy. I started with empathy because it's what I know something about. But if you think about intimacy or love or devotion, you would probably want them from humans and probably for similar reasons. But there are other things that maybe are interesting in other ways, right? Would it be the same to gossip with a friend or to gossip with ChatGPT? Probably not. I don't think a lot of people do that. And there is a question of why? What is it in gossip that makes it especially valued more with another human? Is sharing humor with another person the same as sharing it with AI? Is admiring art the same if the art, the poetry, is made by another person or an AI? And why is it that we have these differences? And lastly, of course, this has lots of implications in our daily lives, right? And we have to remember that we are living in a mental health crisis with so many more people each year depressed and feeling anxious, and not enough therapists available to take care of them. A lot are very expensive, a lot are far away, and do not have ways to get to this care at all. And we know we're still in the midst of a loneliness epidemic. And so it makes a lot of sense that many people, even if they value human connection more than that of AI, are drawn to these websites. This is from an app called Replica, but there are, of course, many others that promise you an AI companion who always cares, who is always empathic and is always on your side, and will always see the world through your eyes. Always available, always there. And we see examples of these from the news today on a daily basis. And I think this is a time, and this is why I'm really passionate about this, to all stop and ask, what are the implications for this in today's lives? What does it mean that millions of people are going online and talking instead of seeking other human beings to these chatbots, to these replicant character and other LLMs that are role-playing whatever it is that they're looking for? And I hope we have time to ask some of these questions in the Q&A. And with this, I want to thank my lab that does all of this work, funding agencies who make this possible, and to thank you all for your attention. Thank you.
Wow, that was so great. So excellent. How do you feel?
I feel good.
How'd I do? Did I do okay? I'm trying to practice my empathy. I'd love to start off like zooming out and talking about, empathy in general, and then we'll dive in and talk about AI in a bit. But in reflecting on our incredible cohort of fellows here this year, your work on empathy really does touch on everything we do. It is really adjacent to what matters to us. In other words, on some level or other, we're working on a whole host of different ideas this year. A play that grapples with whether the concept of a possibility between love yourself and an LLM, or a whole host of books on topics like the complexity of feminism through the lens of Kate Millett's life, or the tragic inhumanity of a single bad credit score, or the confessions of rape during armed conflict. So what advice do you have for us and our public audience on how we can engender more empathy in our work?
This is an excellent and really important question, right, for all of us. And people ask a lot whether empathy is a trait or a state, right? There is something in it that we want to know, well, can I cultivate it? Is it something that I can do to empathize more? And of course, I think we all know from our daily lives that some people are born more empathic than others. But we do know that we can also work on our empathy and on how to expand it. And I'll give you some ideas that I think we can each practice in our work, in our lives. One sounds kind of easy, but we think about empathy as perspective taking, trying to put yourself in the other's shoes, but actually we can't really put ourselves in anyone's shoes, especially not people who we find it hard to empathize with because maybe they're very different from us. And what some studies recommend is actually something called perspective getting. Ask the other person what they feel. Now, people don't always like that because people want to be like automatically empathized with. They want you to just understand, or they want you to make the effort to understand. And when you just ask, well, what it is that you feel, maybe they feel that you put in less effort. But if you ask it in a caring way, it could actually be very valuable for both sides. Say, I've never been through anything like that, but I really want to know something about what it is that you feel. Can you tell me more? Does this make you sad or angry or very stressed? And sometimes you get surprising answers, and suddenly you learn more about how maybe people are really close to you, maybe how your spouse experiences their lives, but maybe a patient, maybe someone who is very different or who's gone through things that you can't even imagine. So that's one way. Another is what we call listening with discomfort. So we don't like to listen when something gives us like a bad feeling. We don't agree with it. We would have reacted differently. It's not something that we would have done. But sometimes it's beneficial. It signals to you that maybe that's a place where you can learn more, and maybe that's a place to stop and listen. We're all really busy in our lives, and we don't stop enough. And we all know from the social media research that we keep getting into our similar echo chambers, get information from people who are very close to us and very similar. And it makes it even more difficult to empathize with people who have different views, who sees the world differently. But maybe that's where the job is important, right? To listen to those people who think a bit different from you, with humility, with discomfort. Give it time and space and actually listen. And empathy could come from exactly these kinds of interactions.
I really appreciate what you said, and it's making me think about the work here at Radcliffe being done about conversations across differences. And so I encourage everyone to take a look at those conversations. That there's a table I know that our dean is really instrumental in forging ahead with this work that kind of speaks to those skills that you're talking about. So that's amazing. So let's dive back into the concept of empathy and AI. And I know that right now, as you mentioned, the landscape for AI is just really booming. And we're turning so much toward AI to look for comfort in therapy. I have a good friend who was like, oh, I don't need to pay, and I can just go to chat, and chat's gonna tell me what to do. And I was like, oh God. And as a mother as well, I see these really stark differences in our engagement with this technology and social media and so forth, and communication. So there are these real generational differences and challenges. I'd love to hear more about that.
I think lots of it is open questions, right? So this is why it's such an important topic, because we need to understand whether what I presented here is something true about our generation. Maybe for us, we value human empathy more, and some people would claim, well, the next generation will receive empathy just fine from AI. It's just you. I don't think that's the case, and if it would be the case, then we would have to define empathy differently, because they would receive it from something that doesn't really share their emotions or care. But it's an empirical question. It could be that the next generation would have more of these personal interactions with chatbots. They already are. It could be that they will be better from us in differentiating between, these things wouldn't confuse them so much. They will know what human relationships are and what is a relationship with a computer. Some of it is up to us to teach them. And I think there are two important things that I want to think about here with you. One is if people and younger generations start receiving some of this empathy and have more and more of these interpersonal interactions with AI, what will it do to our social structure in society, right? If we get this immediate support from these systems, this immediate reward, but without really practicing long-term empathy and social interactions that build trust, that build close relationships, that build new collaborations, how will our social worlds look like? That's one thing that I think is important for not just psychologists, but everyone to start thinking about. And there are things we can do about it, right? Even in terms of policy and regulation, we know the difference that it makes to have phones outside of school and have kids have 8 hours to practice social skills versus not. We're in this learning phase that we have to understand what kind of regulations we want to put here. The other thing I want to stress is I think not only for the next generation, but for all of us, we're going to see cultural changes. And there's a good example of I'm not sure if people are familiar with AlphaGo, the AI that beat a person for the first time in the game of Go, which is considered the most complex game ever, more than chess, more than anything. And what happened after this AI beat humans in Go is that people kept playing Go, but they also learned new moves. The culture changed. People started playing in ways that for thousands of years were not available for humans, and suddenly they were. So the game is different now, even between humans without AI. They learned new things. And I think it's really interesting to think what will happen to our social interactions. And to show that, I want to give you an example from my 2 teenager kids. But I think what they're showing is something we might all be seeing soon. So they had a big celebration not long ago, and one of them got from a teacher of an afternoon art class this really nice emotional letter. She sent it through me, and I was literally in tears when I got it. It was clear that she really saw him. And when I sent it to the boys, one of them read it and said, well, she wrote it with ChatGPT. And then the other one looked at it and said, yeah, for sure, it's ChatGPT. And I knew this wasn't the case. I know this person. And I also asked her, and she said, I don't even know how to use these things. It was clear that's not the case, but it was also clear that these kids are not going to believe it anymore. You can't write anything emotional, personal, that you put a lot of effort in, and they will not think that a bot wrote it for you. And this might be what our world will look like really soon. When we get these emotional emails, whether it's an empathic email about something you're going through, or think about an apology from someone. When we read these things, we want to focus at every word and want to understand, why did they choose this word and not another? What do they actually mean? Is it sincere? Is it genuine? Because again, it's not just what it makes us feel right now. It gives us clues about our relationship and the future. We won't believe any of these clues really soon. If every interaction could have been written by ChatGPT or aided by ChatGPT, then they become much less meaningful. And our culture will change. We might find a new way to show this in writing together with ChatGPT, but still show the effort and care. We might start meeting people in person. And if I want to actually empathize with you and show you I care, I'll have to set a meeting and talk to you like this, and maybe take out all our microphones that may be whispering in our ear whatever ChatGPT thinks I want to say to you, to make it real, to make it genuine, so that you can understand these cues. So our whole cultures are going to change with these new technologies.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing from what you're saying is it feels almost like this pendulum is swinging. And how is it going to swing? We don't know.
We don't know.
But also that the generational differences are just, I mean, to me, I'm sitting here as a parent as well. And I know like there's some school teachers who are like, well, I see the kids on the playground and they're all on their phones and they're texting the person like right there. They're like, just go talk to them, you know, just go and do that. It's just not normal anymore. And they think it's fine. And they think it's, who cares? So there's a lot of complexity there.
There is. And I want to say about the who cares, and maybe it's just our generation, and you know, people said that about TV, and TV wasn't so bad, and so forth. We'll need to wait and see, right? If people talk to chatbots all the time or text their friends, and will become, through that, less lonely for the long run, and their well-being will be better, then maybe that's fine. But if we don't think that's the case, and we have the case of social media showing that, yes, it's rewarding in the short term, but in the long term, people understand that these are not really their friends. They feel more lonely and more depressed and more anxious. If this is what we're going to see, then we have a responsibility to study it, to talk about it, to think about it.
That's so exciting, because really what I hear from that is just how vital the research is, and the work, and the intention, and the thoughtfulness of what you're doing is all about, you know, and the longitudinal thinking about it is also, I think, really key. So that's great. The power of the questions, I really loved what you said about how so much of the study of empathy has been about the empathizer. What does it mean to be an empathic person? But you made this brilliant pivot to flip and say, well, what do we want to receive from empathy? And I think about this a lot as a physician. You know, I try to be empathic, but you know, the skill set that I have matching with the expectation of the patient is really important. And I think I loved, you know, thinking about this. I'm an oncologist. And so I'm deeply in it with my patient at every level for a longitudinal period of time. But take, you know, a surgeon. You know, I love surgeons, you know, and all of that, but they're a different breed in their encounter. And what does a patient who wants the best surgeon, do they want a surgeon like, I feel with you, or not? And that's a complicated question. I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on that.
I think the truth is that we don't yet know. It's easy to say we want an empathic colleague, an empathic friend, an empathic, you know, bank manager. We want everyone to be empathic, but maybe we mean different things by each of these. We call this all empathy, but what we need is something different. And it's clear that you want a different kind of empathy from an oncologist that is following you for a long time. And I think there, what you want is the whole bundle, right? You want an oncologist who understands you, but feels at least some of what you're going through, not as extreme as your feelings are, because you can't work with a person like that, but feel some of it. And we do have research showing that when physicians feel their patient's pain, then they actually also give them more medication, right? If they think they empathize less, they think they're less in pain, they give them less medication. So there is importance in this feeling with, and of course you want your oncologist to care for you. But maybe with a surgeon, it matters less. You want them to be professional, you want them to be polite, you want them to understand your situation, but if they don't share the experience, or even if they don't care, I don't know. We haven't studied that enough, and I think that's one of the key research areas, especially thinking about new technologies. I can give you an example from hospital research that we're working on regarding discharge letters. It turns out, and there's lots of studies from other groups looking at that, and we've looked at that as well, that ChatGPT can look at the case and write really good discharge letters that actually people rate as more empathic, but also more clear to them than what the doctors actually wrote. And they can take, much less time. You don't have to wait for this discharge letter for the whole day. You, of course, want a doctor to review it. You may want the doctor to write the draft and the AI to edit it, but think how much time this could leave for the doctor to actually be there with the patient. So you don't want AI, just one more sentence, you don't want the AI to tell the patient, some bad news or what they're going through or the pain they're going to suffer. There you want a person.
I love that. I love that. And I'm going to blow the cover on the doctor on the other side of that discharge paperwork, because I was that doctor once. And you're the intern or you're the resident and you've got 15 patients on your panel and you have to discharge 2 people by noon so that they can get the bed cleaned for the next patient who's been waiting in the ER for 10 hours. And that pressure goes back to your concept during your talk about time.
Yes.
And how can we harness, AI and empathy in the best possible way? That's a beautiful example of that. And you wouldn't want your AI doctor to tell you you've got however many more potential months or days to live. And that's
Exactly.
a very different, and you'd probably want your doctor at the bedside for that. So.
And Naomi, that also shows us something about the cultural differences that we're going to see here, because suddenly the role of the doctor may change. It could be that AI will take a lot of the jobs that people have been doing. Maybe doctors didn't like writing the discharge letters, but there's lots of the work that they did like to do, that are finding these clues and signals and analyzing data and seeing what else it is similar to. And it could be that we will have models that do this with the doctors and maybe even better than them. And maybe a lot of the doctor's work will be these interpersonal communications, which we won't want to give to AI.
I love that. I would love that. So that's really great. There's a lot of work to be done. I am seeing there's so many questions, and I want to get to one of the ones from our public audience. One of the questions here is, what does your research imply for people who are really likely to engage in AI romances?
Again, this is a tough one, because what we like to do as experimental scientists in the lab is have everything controlled. And I can't do that in the real world, right? I can't bring in 100 participants to the lab and make half of them fall in love with ChatGPT. So what other people do, they're trying to interview these people. This is all very new. We see anecdotes about it in the news. It's probably more than anecdotes because we see a lot of them, but there's not enough of research, especially controlled lab research, to see what these mean. Are these specific personalities? What does it mean about these people? Are they long-lasting, right? Is it something that could work for the long run, or will they become more lonely at some point? We really don't know. So I think there's a lot of open research out there.
Yeah, I think it's really intriguing about the what it says about the person who's really wants that AI romance. Who is that person who's like, yeah, I want to find my person in an AI.
Not in a person.
Might be the same person who's a patient who doesn't care whether their doctor is an actual human or not. So.
And some people maybe do care, but they're so lonely and they don't know how. that they opt for these opportunities. And I think that's something we have to consider. So it's one thing that people like, if you want to push this, people say, well, what about this person who is, let's say, very old and very sick and alone at home and they really have no one? Do you want to say that they can't talk to AI? They shouldn't? It will be bad for them? And of course I don't. I don't think it doesn't have any benefits. It has some. It might have a lot. But it's not the same as human relationships. And what I'm afraid about is that if you look at these extreme examples and then you think about this spectrum and you think of many people who maybe are able to go outside and meet new friends, but it's really hard work to meet new friends and to talk with even your own friends. And people are busy and tired and don't always understand you and have their own kids and troubles. That if you have this cheap option at home and you know it's not the same, you feel it's not the same, but you just go for it instead of forming these relationships. So I think this is where it becomes, I don't want to judge, that person who really feels like that's their best relationship and that's what they want. Fine. Yeah. But what does it do on this spectrum, and how do we want to teach and keep human relationships, I think is really important.
But also just reconnecting to what we said earlier about generational differences. Yes. What if our kids are like, Mom, it's cool, trust me. And I'm like, that really is I can hear that. I can hear that coming from my children. So
yeah, it could be.
Who knows?
But then we'll have to ask, are they actually happy? Is it good for their well-being?
Yeah.
Are they less anxious?
Exactly. This is so exciting. Okay, so there's another really interesting question that came in. It says, one reason why we might value empathy intrinsically is that we value being seen. But we also don't want to be transparent and vulnerable to others, and because that would threaten your sense of self and privacy. Is there a special way that empathy allows us to be seen without being exposed?
That's a really nice one to think about. I think there's a tension here, because first, people want to be seen, and they want to be somewhat exposed, especially if it's someone that they can trust. But we learn who we can trust through these interactions. So it's always like this. If I said before that one of the ways to build empathy is through this discomfort, it actually works on both sides. If you want to get empathy from others, you also have to be willing to feel this discomfort of having, some transparency out there, putting out there who you really are. Sometimes it doesn't look that good. Sometimes you're not really happy with what the other person sees, but it's real, and you might get a real reaction, and it might make you closer to the other person. So I think it's this dance, it's this dyadic tension of feeling a bit of discomfort, but also feeling safe, of feeling that the other person is genuinely caring about you and won't judge you. I think all of this is important, but it also shows how effortful it is for both sides, and why it's really easy for people to just say, you know what, I don't need any of this. I'm going to my computer. So this is a tension, exactly.
Well, it struck me also on your talk where there was that new artificial thing that says, always on your side.
Yes.
Always on your side. What does that mean, always on your side? Like, I have someone in my life whose partner is always on their side. And I'm like, dude, no, not good, not good. My partner is never on my side. I wish you were more on my side. I want always on my side. And so when you want always on your side and when you don't need always on your side, is this real? And it makes me think a lot about the concept of psychological safety. Is when you have the person who is always on your side by not always agreeing with you. And then Can AI do that?
Exactly. Okay, so here's a hard one. AI can do that, but it's not programmed to do that right now, right? I mean, it's not something built into large language models to always agree with you. They are built by companies who have their incentives, and their incentive structure is such that they want you to always keep being engaged and stay online. You could imagine an LLM that says to you, you know what, Naomi, close your computer and go out there and meet friends. This is how you should do it. And if you feel discomfort, still go for it. And if someone insults you, you can answer this and that, but help you engage in real social interactions. It's not something that large language models cannot do. It's something they're not incentivized to do right now because that means you close the computer. They want you to stay online and stay engaged. And they've learned, and this is maybe a sad thing about humans, that in order to keep you engaged, it's good to always agree with you and show you that they always care, even if you know somewhere that what's really good for you is that sometimes your partner doesn't agree with you and gives you, that's real empathy to sometimes say, you know what, you're wrong. You can grow from this. But we don't like it. So we like someone or something that always agrees. And this is incentives of companies that could be different.
I think that's really key, just how they're incentivized and how that moves forward is a big piece of it. We have a couple minutes left. I think, first I'll just ask you, is there anything else that you wanted to mention or talk about that we haven't gotten to quite yet?
There's lots I want to talk about, but I want to listen to the questions. So let's see what questions we have out there.
It says, let's see. Give me 1 second. Okay, so I understand from your presentation that your research looks specifically at human satisfaction with AI-generated empathy. And so while people may be relatively satisfied with it, I wonder what negative effects AI-generated empathy could have on people. What's the real harm that we need to be careful of?
Great. If I had to end with one thing, this is what I would end with. So this is an excellent question. First, again, we don't know. This is all new. This is what we're studying right now. No one has done this research. But what I think from the data that we do have is that there will be a big difference between short-term interactions and long-term interactions, and short-term implications. The short-term implications might make you feel good. You know it's not the same as interacting with another human, but your humans are not available right now, or you don't want to make the effort. And this is rewarding. It might be rewarding for even a longer relationship. But if you think about the long-term effects for society, if people stop making the effort and feeling discomfort in their relationships and looking for more intimate relationships, more empathy, giving empathy to others, because others can go to their LLMs as well. So you'll stop making the effort to empathize and stop making the effort to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and receive empathy. I think the real danger is what will happen to human social connections and what will happen to our society and social structure in general.
Yeah, that's great. That's amazing. Okay, well, I think here we're going to wrap up. And thank you, Anat, for just such an interesting presentation and this fun dialogue. Also want to thank our public audience and those of you who submitted really terrific questions. And you can find out a lot more about future programming and watch the videos of past events on radcliffe.harvard.edu. And thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you in the new year.